Alright, the next thing I want to do is look around. Maybe there's a frayed wire, a loose connection. Yeah! We have inspections in this area by Environmental Health, and they came out and said my septic system, everything looked good, but my alarm wasn't working. And the way you test the alarm is you just push this trigger one way or the other, and the buzzer is supposed to go off and this light's supposed to light up, and neither one's working. So I'll show you the train of thought that I go through to try to diagnose and fix this. First thing I'm going to do is unscrew this so I can open it up. And here we are. Got our pump off, hand, so you can turn this to off. It's on auto, so there's a float in the tank. The float comes up, turns the pump on, pumps it out into the drain field, and then shuts it off when the float goes back down. And then hand, that turns it on. Pump on. The pump's on right now. So I'll leave it on auto. Now there's two breakers in the panel, and one says for the alarm and the other one says for the pump. And so I see I've got a black wire coming in, a white wire, a copper wire, and a red wire. The black wire is going to that bottom bar there, and the red wire is going to this upper bar here. Now I assume this is all hot here. I've got rubber boots on. You want to be very careful working with electricity. This is not 220, this is 110 here. And so I'm just going to check for power here first while I've got this on. And I'm going to set my multimeter to AC volts. And I don't need 750. I should be getting 120, so I'll set it on 200. And I'm going to touch the black to ground, which is this copper wire here. And I'm going to touch the red to the black first, which is down here on the pump side. And I got 121.8. So I've got power to that bar. But I don't have a problem with the pump. My problem is with the alarm, which is up here, which is this red wire. And I got 121.8. So I have power going to both of these. So my problem is not between here and the breaker box. My problem is between here and this switch or this light or this buzzer. First thing I want to do is check if this will turn off power to this up here. So I just turned that to off. Again, I'm going to put this on the ground and this on the hot, and I got 0. So I shut that off. But this is also very close here, so I'm going to shut this one off and double check this. Ground, checking my hot wire, and I got both of these off. So the power is off going to this box. The other thing I'm going to do is run inside and turn the breaker off real quick, and then I know I've got no power coming here. The first one up here is barn, and then I've got septic alarm and septic pump. So there's my barn up there, and I got septic alarm and septic pump right here. Cut those off. Alright, the next thing I want to do is look around. Maybe there's a frayed wire, a loose connection. I'm going to concentrate on this top circuit board here, and I'm going to check and make sure that all these connections are tight. Wires aren't broken. So that's all looking good. Check my switch here. That looks good. And the wire to the alarm. I don't see any frayed wires. I don't see a loose connection anywhere in here. Oh, one thing I see here is this black tube, and I think it says fuse in there. Ho, 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 would that be sweet? Now, it's too small to read, so I'm going to take a picture of it and then zoom in. And it says fuse size. So that is a fuse. Right there. I don't see any cracks in the board. So let's go ahead and check this fuse. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Hee, hee. You see how black that is? I think we've got a blown fuse. If you've got complete connection, there's no broken wire, or in this case, the fuse is good, in other words, the connection's good in there, all you have to do, you touch these together, and you should get a reading of 0. That means that there is no broken wire. You've got a complete connection. If you've got a bad connection, if this wire was broken, it'd be like touching it to the plastic. You just get a 1. So we'll go ahead and test this. I'll touch this to one end. We got nothing. We got a bad fuse. Written on here is exactly the fuse that you need. We'll put it in and see if that fixes our problem. Oh, would that be a treat. I don't need this on, but I do need the pump on while I'm gone getting a fuse or whatever. So I'm going to turn the breaker on at the panel, and then I'll turn this switch on, and that'll enable the pump, so if it fills up, it'll still pump. Okay, here we are back at it. I got a fuse. Of course, I was so excited to find that a blown fuse was there. I haven't paid any attention to this alarm for years, but the last time the alarm went off, I was out of town, and my next door neighbor heard the alarm going off for over 24 hours, didn't know what it was. Then he remembered I was out of town, and he thought, maybe I better go over there and see what's wrong. So he came over here and he turned it off, but that might have been enough to cause some problems with this. So I'm hoping it's just the fuse, but be realistic, it could be one of 3 things if it's not just the fuse. It could be the alarm itself, which is right here. It could be this switch that tests the alarm, or it could be the light. Could be any one of those 3 things or none of them at all. Maybe it's just the fuse. I'm hoping so. That would be wonderful. I called the company, the manufacturer of this. Really nice people, the technical support, and they know their stuff. And if I need help diagnosing this, I can call them and they can help me. But I did find out this box is like $650. I do not want to buy that. But he also said there were still parts available for this, so I can buy this light, or I can buy this switch, and I can buy this buzzer still, which I'm thankful for. I got a few fuses, and I think what I'm going to do first is go ahead and just try a fuse. I got like 10 of them. On the board, it says you can go up to 3 amps, 250 volt fuse. But when I talked to the guy, I pulled a 2 amp out of there. He said, no, 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 no. He said, don't go over a 2 amp. Stay with the 2 amp. So don't try to go with a larger fuse just to fix a problem. Now I'm going to go in and turn the breaker on, and it still won't have power there, but then I can turn this switch on, and we'll just see if it blows or what it does. Here we go. And turn this on. Now I can run a test. We didn't blow any fuses. Oh, that'd be a treat if that's all it takes. That's why I was so excited, thinking maybe that thing was just on so long that just wore it out, and the fuse, it got too hot, and the fuse said, I've had enough of this. This light doesn't seem to be lighting up real bright, but turn the power back off. I'm going to put it back together. And we'll test the float switch just to make sure that's working. I just use a hose to stick down in there. And that float, this is the pump down there. The float's right here. Pump's working. Oh boy. The float's not working. Float switch. That's not good. Oh! Did you hear that? Huh? All right, I gotta confess, I'm a little confused by this. Okay, we've made progress narrowing this down. Now I want to do one last test before I order anything. And that is, I want to make sure that the problem is the float switch and not the wire. So what I'm going to do, when I turn this on, everything comes on. So either there's a short in the wire between here and the float, or there's a short in the float switch. So when I turn this on, the alarm comes on. Of course, I can turn it off, but what I'm going to do now is turn this off, power off. Now I'm going to disconnect these two wires. They're 18 gauge wires. They go to the float switch. It's a continuous wire. Runs from here right to the float. So I'm going to disconnect these, and hopefully the problem's not in my box here. With this disconnected, when I turn the alarm on, this shouldn't buzz. We'll go ahead and turn this on. Nothing. So this is all working in here. We've got a problem between here and the float, and it's either a short in this wire or a short in the float. I'm going to turn this back off. Now I'm going to show you how we're going to test that down there. Okay, as you saw, I've got the power off and the wires disconnected, and I need to get the wire that goes to the float. It's this wire right here. And it goes from the float down there and then into the conduit and straight back to the control panel. So here's what I'm going to do. I got plenty of wire here. There's no power going to this. I'm going to cut this. Make sure I got the right one here. And I do. And now I've got no power going to the float. So if the problem is in the wire, it's still going to buzz. If the problem's in the float, it's not going to buzz anymore. Went and washed my hands real quick. Now, I'm going to hook these wires back up. And what that's going to tell me, I'm going to turn that switch back on. And if this thing does not buzz, that tells me that the wire's fine and the float switch is bad. If it does buzz, then that tells me there's probably a short in this wire. And I'm hoping that it does not buzz, because then all I have to do is change out that float switch. And here we go, the big test. On. Hey! No sound. So that means we don't have a complete connection, and that tells me that that float switch, just like I said, when it's tipped up, that ball drops, and it either drops a mechanism or it drops the ball in here to complete the connection. And when it's upside down, or the water level's low, then that ball drops down here and it disconnects that connection. So that tells me that that is shorted out in that float switch. I'm going to order a new one. We'll install it and see if that takes care of our problem. I got the float switch. I bought mine online. To get it locally, I had to wait 2 weeks, and I got this in a few days. You can hear in here the ball that's moving around. So when the water's down, that's in the off position. The switch, the connection is up in here. If the water table comes up and the pump's not working, this will rise with the water. That ball drops into place and complete the connection. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and hook this up before I install it, just to make sure that this fixes our problem. You know, we cut the wire. This is the cut wire here. So I want to pull this out so I can splice this float switch in. And I can bring it right up here, work on it. Okay, and I'm just going to strip some of the sheathing off here. I'm not going to go through this and cut the wires. And then I'll just strip about 3/4 of an inch off the end. Okay, I'm just going to set the float right here, connect these wires. And it's just simple, black to black, white to white. Those are separated, so I don't mind just leaving that open because I'm just doing a quick test. Now I'm going to go turn the power on, and hopefully the alarm's not going to go off, and then I'll take the float and tip it up, and hopefully the alarm will come on. Now, I'm going to turn the power on, and hopefully the alarm's not going to go off. Hey! So I went in, I turned the breaker back on at the breaker box. I turned the switch back on at the control panel. I checked, I do have 120 there at the control panel. Now I'm going to go ahead and lift the float. My wires are separated there. Don't touch those. I'm going to lift the float, and hopefully, as it tips up, the alarm's going to go off. Yeah! There we go. Now I can turn the power back off, and we'll connect it permanently. Now this float is not just any float. If you go online, you can find floats for $12. Well, I ended up getting this directly from Rambus because they have the panel, but this is a 5 amp float. Most of the floats you're going to see are 13 amp, and you don't want that. That's going to create problems with voltage. So make sure you get a 5 amp float. I just got these temporarily taped here, all these extra wires. So I'm going to pull these off. You don't want to drop anything down in there and clog your pump. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to disconnect this coupler. And if yours doesn't have a coupler, you're going to have to install one. You have to cut the pipe and then buy this coupler and put it on so you can take this apart here. But I'm just going to unscrew this. And there's a rubber O-ring in here you don't want to lose. And the rubber O-ring is right on here. There it is. I'm going to set that aside in the shade. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this, and I can lift it by hand, but it's just me here. So what I'm going to do is hook this up to my tractor, the front end loader, and I'm just going to lift it enough so that I can get at the hose clamp that's holding the alarm on. And I've got the old alarm on there still. Now if you're changing out your pump, you'll take this whole thing out, you disconnect those wires, and you pull this whole thing out, and then it's just a threaded connection down at the pump. You unscrew this, screw it back on the new pump, and put all your wires back on. You'll have new wires with your pump, and then you just connect the quick coupler and you're done. So I'm going to pull this up about 3 or 4 feet, and you want to make sure that the wires are loose so that you don't break them. And if you're concerned about that, just disconnect your connections and then it'll be free. And if you're doing your pump, disconnect those and separate them, and you can pull it right out. A strap here, I'm going to put it around the PVC pipe, and the original installers didn't put a rope in there. If there was a rope connected to the handle of the pump, I'd hook that up, but they didn't. So I'm going to hook this around the pipe, pull it through, pull it tight, and then with the front end loader, pull it up. Okay, I just preliminarily, in case something moves, want to measure how far down the float is from the hose clamp, and the top of the plastic part of the float to the top of the hose clamp is about 5.5 inches. And the hose clamp is 16 inches down from the top of this pipe, just in case something moves. Concerned about the rope here, but I can take it around the back side and it'll stay away from both floats. You don't want your rope getting in the way of the float. that'd be a big problem. Okay, get my O-ring back on. Now, of course, you don't want to cross-thread this. There we go. There we are. And if this leaks just a little bit, that doesn't concern me. Now, before I go and wire this all up and tape it and everything, I want to make sure that it's working properly. So I'm going to turn the power back on. On. No alarm. Beautiful. And now I'm going to test the float installed down there. There we go. Beautiful. We're back in. Okay, ideally, that hose clamp is not the way to hook that up. They make a clip that goes on there, and then you weave the wire through it, and it's held by the clip. Now, I've had this for 22 years. I haven't had any problems, but Rhombus says that you have to use the clip, or you should use the clip. But that float comes up so seldom, it shouldn't come up at all, but it warns you if your pump's broken or there's another problem. So I think it'll be fine for another 20 years, hopefully. But the place that I bought that, they didn't sell it with the clip. So I just went ahead with that and did it the way the guys did it 22 years ago. So I think it'll hold up fine. Okay, all I have to do is put wire nuts on here. Now, one thing that they recommend is that you put these wire connections in waterproof boxes. Again, this was installed 22 years ago, and all they did, you got to use quality tape, like Scotch brand or whatever. But all they did was wire nutted these and taped them up real good. They don't sit in the water. Now I'm going to seal these up good and go to the wire nut. So everything's tight, tight, tight. Now, I lost a glove. It was all ripped up, and I'm keeping my hands away from my face, from my nose, from my mouth, from my eyes, and I'm going to wash my hands as soon as I'm done with this. Okay, I've got the power off still. The way the septic company had this, they just took all these wires, bunched them together, and wrapped them up, and taped them to the pipe. And I'm going to do the same thing. I know it's a lot of extra wires, but it might come in handy one day. And you can work up there instead of working down here in the tank. And like I said, make sure you use quality tape. This stuff will hold up. You get that cheap tape, and it'll just fall apart. Everything's out of the way. My floats are free. Got the power back on. Check the float. For the pump, first, she's good. Check the alarm. Yeah! We're done. If this video was a help to you, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. And I look forward to helping you with other projects online.